For a long time, the common sense of Nen that we readers, and the analysts of the Hunter Association, believed in without a shadow of a doubt is now crumbling with a thunderous roar. Enhancers are simple and earnest, transmuters are whimsical. We are no longer talking about the level of mere personality diagnostics. The fundamental rules that have supported Nen battles, the very logic of the hexagram 6 types diagram, might be nothing more than meaningless scribbles in the face of the exception known as specialization. On the voyage to the Dark Continent, aboard the Black Whale 1. Within that closed-off hell, the words spoken by Morena Prudo, the boss of the Howlai family, were not merely the presentation of new facts, they were a paradigm shift that redefines the history of Hunter x Hunter to date. Today, based on the shocking information revealed around the latest Chapter 408, we will explore the abyss of the specialist with unprecedented resolution in this hyperlong narration. The selected errors. First, we must tremble at the number. Approximately 0.033%. This is the probability of a specialist appearing, as calculated by Morena Prudo. Let us apply this to a concrete population ratio. 1 in 3,000. At first glance, it might seem like a figure where there isn't one in my class, but there might be a few in the whole school. However, this is likely not a ratio against the total population, but an extraction from within Nen users, or humans with the potential for Nen. In a world where awakening to Nen is already rare for the general public, a probability of 0.033% within that group can no longer be dismissed with the word talent. It is a genetic mutation, or perhaps a glitch in fate, an error. Up until now, many specialists have appeared in the story: Kralo, Kurapika, Neon, Huluka, Seridnich, Putu, Muruam. This oversupply of specialists has numbed our senses. They were depicted only because they are the protagonists, or final bosses, standing at the center of the story. Behind them lie the corpses of hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, of mediocre users who could not become specialists. The search for specialists that Morena ordered her subordinates to undertake. That was a task as daunting as finding a single diamond in a desert. What she sought was not mere military power, but a singularity itself that could ignore the rules of this world. The collapse of the hexagram, not mountains, but plains. Here is the main issue. The truth that shook all Hunter fans: specialists have no weaknesses. To digest the meaning of this, we must reaffirm the traditional learning of Nen. Conventionally, mastering Nen has been likened to mountain climbing. You aim for the summit your own type, level 10. You can only climb the adjacent mountains adjacent types up to the 8th station, and the mountains on the opposite side opposite types only up to the 4th station. This is why, when Castro, an enhancer, tried to climb the distant mountains of conjuration and manipulation, he wasted his memory capacity and met with distress defeat. This was the absolute truth. However, for specialists, this mountain does not exist. Spreading out before them is an endless, flat plain. Enhancement, emission, transmutation, manipulation, conjuration. No matter which direction they proceed, they can learn that technique without feeling the resistance of weakness. The concept of affinity does not exist. However, does this mean a cheat code of 100% in all categories, invincibility? No. Borrowing the concept of effort values, EVs, from gaming data, it is most natural to interpret it this way. Specialists do not have an initial status bonus, but in exchange, they are not subject to the limits of a growth cap. While a normal user has a guideline like, because I am an enhancer, only the enhancement skill tree grows easily, a specialist is completely flat. For example, a status distribution like, conjuration 80%/emission 80%. In the normal hexagram, this is absolutely impossible because if you are a conjurer, you can inherently only handle emission at about 40 to 60%. But for a specialist, this is realizable. Having no weaknesses did not mean being the strongest, but rather meant design freedom, the ability to build any distorted shape of ability. The specialist cliché, the hell-named jack of all trades. However, that freedom is also the greatest trap. Morena pointed this out ruthlessly. Because they have no weaknesses, they master another category without realizing they are a specialist, and they regret it later. Imagine a man. He doesn't know he is a specialist. Because he happens to be good at fighting, he convinces himself, I am an enhancer, and begins training. Because he has no weaknesses, his enhancement training proceeds smoothly. He grows to a decent level without hitting a wall. However, when it comes to a top-level battle, he realizes, I can absolutely never win against a pure breed enhancer like Yuvajin in terms of raw power. The true value of a specialist lies not in digging deep into a single category, but in the hybrid composite of categories that are originally incompatible. How many specialist users must there be who wasted their limited time, memory, and life training a single category without realizing this? Being able to do anything is two sides of the same coin as becoming nothing. One must deeply understand the characteristics of one's own soul and construct one's own optimal solution by oneself. Specialization is a cruel and solitary category that demands self-analysis philosophy more than any other. Anatomy of the monsters, Kralo, Gorinyu, and Pitu. Now that we have obtained this perspective of affinity ignoring hybrids, the strength of the monsters in the story can be explained logically. Kralo Lucifer, head of the Phantom Troop. His ability, Skill Hunter, steals and uses the abilities of others. The categories of the stolen abilities vary widely. There are Enhancer Punches, Conjurer Cloaks, and Manipulator Dolls. Normally, if you use an ability other than your own type, the power and precision would drop drastically. Yet, Kralo utilizes these at a combat-ready level. Why? Because he is a specialist, and he possesses the characteristic that, no matter which category of ability is set in the slot, no negative correction penalty is applied. His book is external storage designed to maximize the flat aptitude of a specialist. It can be said to be one of the completed forms of a specialist user. Gorinyu, the Sage of Greed Island. Gorinyu has been a subject of debate for many years. He conjured a gorilla conjuration, controlled it remotely manipulation, and further, swapped positions emission. He was exercising all the categories that lie on opposite sides of the hexagram at a high level. Under the traditional theory, it was said, he's wasting more memory than Castro, or he's actually too much of a genius. But with this new information, a hypothesis stands. Wasn't Gorinyu also a specialist or someone with qualities equivalent to one? Reconciling conjuration and emission, oil and water, and establishing a perfect combo. This might be the true identity of the hybrid technique only possible for specialists that Morina spoke of. Neferpitu Chimera and Royal Guard. Let us look at the ability composition of Pitu, a specialist. Dr. Blythe involves conjuration, manipulation, and specialization. Terpsichore is a physical combat ability close to manipulation, enhancement, and emission. And shapeshifting involves transmutation and emission. The reason Pitu could handle such a wide variety of categories at the highest level from birth is none other than the flat access rights to all categories possessed by a specialist, in addition to the species stats of an amp. Kurapika's Emperor Time, its true horror. Then, what about Kurapika, who fights to retrieve the eyes of his brethren? His ability, Emperor Time, has the effect of making the acquisition rate of all categories 100%. A question arises, if specialists originally have no weaknesses, isn't Emperor Time meaningless? But that is a hasty conclusion. A normal specialist is merely a plain flat. Consider it a state of having, for example, a uniform 80 points aptitude for all categories. They are not weak, but they cannot reach the specialist 100 points. However, Kurapika's Emperor Time is different. Along with the activation of the Scarlet Eyes, he explosively increases the absolute volume of his aura, and by imposing the insane restriction that 1 second of use shortens his life by 1 hour, he forcibly causes the flat plane, which is originally 80 points, to undergo a tectonic uplift, raising all categories to the summit of 100 points. In other words, Emperor Time is an access right to the domain of God, theoretically impossible, that reconciles specialist versatility with expert power height. It is a state where the initial setting of having no weaknesses is overclocked to the limit by whittling away his life. That is the true identity of Emperor Time, and herein lies the reason why he is so exhausted. He is exercising roles that should normally be shared by several people, all as the strongest, with just a single body. Flags for the future. The silence of Gon and the evolution of Serednich. Finally, let us consider the future indicated by this new information. Gon Freaks, who has currently lost his nin abilities and stepped away from the main stage of the story. If he were to revive, it might not be as the simple enhancer he was before. Wing once made Gon perform training for all categories level 1. What if that basic training was a foreshadowing for when he awakens as a post-acquired specialist? Jajankan, Rock Enhancement, Scissors Transmutation, Paper Emission. His style of switching between these is the very prototype of a hybrid. We can dream of a future where Gon, awakened as a specialist with the weakness category limiter removed, returns as the ultimate all-rounder nin user, surpassing even his father, Jing. In the terror currently in progress, the fourth Prince Serednich. He is a specialist and a beginner who has just started nin training. However, even without knowing Morina's words, he is instinctively tracing the specialist's optimal solution. While using precognition specialization, he learns basic techniques like Zetsu, Ren, and Gyeo at a genius speed, and employs a guardian spirit beast conjuration/manipulation. If he realizes the fact that he can master any category and begins to greedily incorporate even the physical durability of an enhancer or the attack range of an emitter, we will likely witness the birth of a perfect organism of technique and malice, evolved in a vector different from Muruo. To the unknown continent. The ripple called 0.033%, cast by Morina Prudhoe. It was something that shook the rules of the story called Hunter x Hunter from the foundation and reconstructed them. Castro's tragedy was an inevitability born of ignorance. Prolo's strength was an inevitability born of knowledge. And Kurapika's lifespan was the price paid to transcend reason. Specialization is a gift given by the heavens, and at the same time, a curse that compels one to keep asking, who am I? Inside the ship heading for the Dark Continent, a world where common sense does not apply, what kind of drama will these ability users outside of common sense weave? The board of the succession contest deepens in chaos, more complex, more cruel, and more beautiful. When you turn the next page, your common sense regarding Nen will be overturned once again.